Morning, night, or noon, everyone. Welcome back to The Fog, and let's get straight into it and see what's on the menu today. Macbeth Killer Remake. So the name of this paragraph is the Scottish play, and it comes with a remake of our first killer on the channel. Now, let's start with a big thank you to Witch Salem for doing an amazing job on this original design for the Despot, aka Macbeth. Instagram is linked below, so be sure to go and give her all the love and support you can spare. To start going into the extended lore of Macbeth. Macbeth was born amid the Highlands of Scotland to a noble father, the Thane of Glamis, a title he would inherit into adulthood. He was sent away at a young age to a small monastery in fear of his father's assassination. With growing tensions rising in the kingdom of Alba, Macbeth's father knew that the one safe place was under the house of God. Macbeth spent many years in the monastery, surrounded by men of God, monks, priests. To Macbeth, they were men of prestige. They spoke with sway and charisma, the power to hold a room of men entranced as they spun wild tales of angels and devils, good and evil, the never-ceasing battle between God and Satan's army. They were fantastical tales. Macbeth was not deceived. There was no proof on this earth of God or the devil, and so Macbeth climbed to the highest tower in the monastery, and he declared, "If there be a God, may he bring me fortune and favour. And if you are ever revealed as a charlatan, then may you strike me down!" A dark fog whirled above him in the sky. Lightning did strike that night, but it did not strike Macbeth. Instead, it struck many miles away, causing a fire within a stable, and soon the whole city was set ablaze, so bright that Macbeth could watch light the Highland hills. When the priest found out about Macbeth's declaration, he was less than thrilled. Macbeth was beaten again and again by the priest, all the way until he was a young man, though the last straw came with the death of his father. When Macbeth heard the news, he drank himself into a stupor, and when the priest came to discipline him, Macbeth killed the priest, tarnishing the consecrated stones of the monastery and taking off into the night. When Macbeth returned to his now home of Glamis, he found it a wreck, overrun by the rebels who aligned with the traitor MacDonald, who had placed himself as Thane in Macbeth's absence. Macbeth rode up the lands to meet with King Duncan of Alba, and the king granted him aid. Macbeth led his army to reconquer Glamis from the clutches of MacDonald, believing his prayers had finally been heard. Macbeth fought for Duncan in many battles against both MacDonald and the invading Norwegians led by King Sweno. Macbeth slayed them all before finally leading to MacDonald's execution at Macbeth's hands. Macbeth rode alongside his ally, Banquo, to meet with Duncan to inform him of their success. But on their way, they encountered an oddity. 3 wicked sisters, all cackling and laughing in joy amidst the dreary day. "Speak, if you can. Who are you?"
"All hail, Macbeth! Hail to thee, Thane of Glamis! Hail to thee, Thane of Cawdor! All hail, Macbeth, that shalt be king hereafter!"
The two paid no heed to the wicked sisters and carried along to Duncan, but on their arrival, Duncan praised them and declared Macbeth as Thane of Cawdor. Upon hearing this, Macbeth was sent into such a state of shock, a fire ignited inside him. Not ignited, roared. It had inspired something that was already present inside him, feeding the endless pit in his heart. Macbeth went to his wife, Lady Macbeth, a closed letter which would no doubt seal their fates. Upon reading it and learning of the prophecy, she called upon an unknown force, asking for its blessing and to strip her of femininity. Lady Macbeth confided to Macbeth whispers of a plot to kill Duncan as he slept within Macbeth's own castle. It was an unholy idea. Macbeth could never, but it was that word, unholy, that sparked memories again in Macbeth's mind. The lightning, the priest, all of it was within God's will and his promise. Duncan would arrive that night to Macbeth's castle, and Macbeth would go to the roof to ponder his actions one last time, where he would meet again with Banquo. The two talked for a moment, but upon leaving, a dagger would appear before Macbeth, floating in the air, a premonition of what he was going to do. That night, Macbeth killed Duncan in his sleep, leaving the daggers with 2 guards who were meant to be on watch. Macbeth was crushed by guilt, his hands never seeming to be free of blood. Macbeth knew he would need to consolidate his power, driving away Duncan's sons and lavishing in the title, King of Scotland. But then he remembered something something not spoken to him, glossed over in his moment of glory.
Thou shalt get kings, though thou be none, so all hail Banquo and Macbeth.
Banquo, and now his suspicion of Macbeth's ascendancy made sense. The man whom Macbeth had trusted with his life would steal his throne, and so he sent out an assassin to intercept Banquo and his son, Fleance, having both of them killed, or so Macbeth thought. Once he learned that Fleance had escaped, Macbeth was flooded with paranoia, even seeing the mutilated spectre of the dead Banquo at his banquet table, sending him into a delirium. Lady Macbeth covered it well, but Macbeth needed to know he was safe. He travelled again, seeking out the weird sisters and their prophecy, demanding to the god Hecate for answers, to which she brought 3 apparitions before him, which told,
"Beware, Macbeth. You'll be bloody and bored, for none of women born shall harm Macbeth. Macbeth shall never be vanquished, till great men and wood come to hide and slay him."
And so it was sealed. The only fear Macbeth needed to have was Macduff, of whose family Macbeth quickly dispatched of. But Macbeth's bloody reign had not sat well with those in the south. Macduff allied with the exiled son of Duncan, Malcolm, and raised an army to take Macbeth from the throne. Macbeth was so blinded by his ambition, he had neglected to see that the ailments his wife suffered from, restless nights and guilt-filled delusions. None of the doctors in the land could figure out what was wrong, or where the damned spot Lady Macbeth constantly spoke of originated from. That night, driven by guilt, Lady Macbeth would take her own life, taking a dagger to her chest several times over. It was Macbeth who found her body. This is the last string that snapped and broke Macbeth, descending into madness finally and demanding his men armed ready for the battle against Macduff and Malcolm. Macbeth commanded his archers to take the high ground, preparing to rain death upon the rebellion's soldiers, and so Macduff and Malcolm cut down the trees of Birnam Wood and bent them into shields. Macbeth watched in horror. Birnam Wood had come to high Dunsinane. His fall would be soon. The enemies rammed his battlements and stormed the castle where Macduff had found Macbeth, sitting alone on his throne, laughing like a madman as he made his final declaration as king. "I will not yield to kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet." In that duel that followed, Macbeth was not victorious, for Macduff was from his mother's womb, untimely ripped. Macbeth felt the cold steel hit his neck, but when he looked up to face his executioner, to face the god who he believed had betrayed him, instead he was only met by a fog. A new realm lay before him, where he alone would wear the bloody crown. So that was the lore of the Despot, a mixture of the original story as established by Shakespeare in his 1607 play, Macbeth, as well as a mix of the real-life story of King Macbeth Mac Finlake, the Red King of Scotland, who ascended to power after the King of Alba, Duncan I, was killed in battle against Macbeth's army. The story also contains my own little snippets of original lore that add to Macbeth's story and establish his disdain for Christ, and why he is so quick to turn his back on him when his ambition is tempted, since not much is clear about childhoods of both Macbeths. So, what I went for is something that establishes why Macbeth has an ambition in the first place. Despite being a noble, he grew up with people who, from his point of view, lied to him and others to keep them submissive. Now, let's get on to the power. The Despot's power is called Sister's Prophecy, and it has had quite a few changes since the last time we saw it. The entity has granted Macbeth the ability to channel the powers of fate through the bloody crown, which when filtered through Macbeth's madness leads to interesting results. Sister's Prophecy is comprised into 4 key abilities that the Despot is able to use: Grave Hands, Bloody Conviction, Sleep No More, and Webs of Darkness. These powers will automatically cycle when holding down the secondary power button. While swapping powers, the Despot will hold his hand on the crown and it will glow red, acting as an indicator to survivors when he is changing power. Grave Hands. When selected and holding the ability button, a large diamond shape in front of the Despot on the ground will be shown. Releasing the active ability button will cause the targeted area to have hands rise from the ground in a 10-meter radius and grab onto any interactable objects within the radius, including generators, pallets, totems, and lockers. When an object is being held onto, survivors are unable to interact with these objects and must use a prophetic foil to dispel the hands, or wait 15 seconds before the hands disperse on their own. Grave Hands has a cooldown of 30 seconds, minus 2 seconds for every object covered by the hands. Bloody Conviction. Bloody Conviction activates when a survivor is bleeding. If a bleeding survivor interacts with an object for longer than 15 seconds, the object becomes stained and looks to be covered in blood. The Despot can see the aura of stained objects and can use the active ability button to cause a 5-meter radius around it to be flooded with blood, damaging the object and causing any survivors to scream and reveal their aura. Bloody Conviction works on a 10-second cooldown. Sleep No More. Sleep No More can only be activated while in 25 meters of a survivor with line of sight. While in this radius, the Despot is able to use the ability to pull survivors into his madness using the active ability button. This causes the gamut of the world to decrease heavily, also causing all interactable objects in the world to flicker in and out of visibility. Sleep No More has a cooldown of 40 seconds and only ends once the survivor ends a chase with the Despot or after 60 seconds. Webs of Darkness. A passive ability that causes shadow webs to form on objects around the map when survivors do not come within 3 meters of the object for 120 seconds. Once these webs form, it takes 15 seconds before the webs solidify, meaning they can only be removed with prophetic foils. Once solidified webs form, the Despot is able to focus his power and teleport to covered objects with a 30-second cooldown using the active ability button. Prophetic foils. Across the map, up to 8 pedestals will spawn across the map. Each pedestal is highlighted to survivors, and every 25 seconds, a new item will spawn on the pedestal, indicated by the sound of an owl. Prophetic foils can be carried alongside other survivor items. The Lit Candle Holder. The Candle Holder is an item that works on 30 charges and are depleted at a rate of 1 charge per second. The Candle Holder is able to dispel the Despot's abilities, such as stains, grave hands, solidified webs, and bring survivors back from Sleep No More. Using the Candle Holder creates an aura around the survivor using it, which indicates the range of the dispelling effect. Banquet Chalice. The chalice is an item that can only be used twice before it disappears. The chalice can be used while stationary and while running. The survivor is able to drink from the chalice, rendering them completely invisible to the Despot. The Despot will also begin to suffer from hallucinations once the chalice is used. During these hallucinations, the survivor who used the chalice will randomly switch from being invisible to back to being visible. This effect lasts for 10 seconds and takes a 0.5 delay to activate. There is a short delay between each use of the chalice of 15 seconds that starts once the initial hallucinations finish. Royal Prayer Book. The Prayer Book is an item that can only be used once before it disappears. The Prayer Book must be used while stationary and takes 5 seconds for its effects to be enabled. Once a survivor uses the Prayer Book, the Despot is unable to use the Bloody Crown to change or use their abilities for 25 seconds. The survivor who uses the Prayer Book will be shown through Killer Instinct for 3 seconds. As you can see, Macbeth's ability has changed slightly since his first iteration, which was done to make his power feel more interactive. Since the original versions of Sleep No More, Webs of Darkness, and Bloody Conviction were all essentially passive abilities, I wanted the power to feel more interactive and give more initiative to the player. I also felt that the original Grave Hands was quite weak, only being able to work around generators, so I made it more like a mix of Doctor and Unknown. Now, on the screen now, I'm going to flash up Macbeth's reworked add-ons. The add-on names and descriptions remain the same, but the effects have been changed to fit the new power. Now, all that leaves is the perks, and like everything else, they've been reworked to fit current DBD better, especially since Henry Creel literally just stole the original idea behind Hex Instruments of Darkness. Starting with Undone Pride. When a survivor performs an altruistic action inside your terror radius, they suffer from the blind effect for 20, 30, 40 seconds, and a 3% hindered status for 15 seconds. Hex Instruments of Darkness. This hex activates once a generator has been completed. When this hex is active, all survivors who are not within 3 meters of generator have their aura revealed to the killer. After a survivor unhooks in your terror radius 3, 2, 1 times, Fatal Ambition activates. While Fatal Ambition is active, any survivors who take protection hits will become broken for 90 seconds. Overall, I think this has become one of my most beloved chapters, and for all those out there taking their exams right now in GCSE English, this chapter is chock full of authentic quotes from Macbeth itself. In fact, I originally made this chapter as an alternative way to study, so feel free to do so. In conclusion, another big thanks to Witch Salem for designing Macbeth. She did a fantastic job, and be sure to go support her via Instagram. We'll be seeing a lot more of her around here, I think. Thanks for visiting, and that's all on the menu today. See you in the fog.